Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week, I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point, we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results. Welcome back to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Now, for those who are new to the show, the goal is to share game-changing stories that our guests are experiencing with themselves, their team, or what they're seeing in the industry. Now, as salespeople, we're typically very competitive. Even myself, we like to win. But we have to have a clear vision and we can't be afraid to put in the work. And working through a pandemic month after month with a lot of uncertainty, we may not be winning as much. And as a result, it's taking a toll on us. So, for the things that are within our control, how can we develop a champion mindset to really focus and achieve the success we're looking for? And to help me answer this question, I'm excited to welcome Coach Dana Cavalli to the podcast. Coach Dana is the former director of strength and conditioning and performance for the New York Yankees. He's also the author of Habits of a Champion. Nobody becomes a champion by accident. And now he coaches CEOs, high performance business folks, and professional athletes. So, Coach Dana, welcome to the podcast.
Karen, thanks for having me.
What a treat this is. I think the experience you're going to share, your story to get to where you are today is going to just be so valuable for our audience, especially, with what we're going through in all the adversities and uncertainties with the pandemic. So, Coach, why don't you back it up a little bit? And obviously, a lot of people would aspire to be, where you were with the New York Yankees. So what did it take to get there? As a little boy, did you always have a dream to be in the major leagues? Did you visualize, on the field? Like, what was that journey? What did it look like?
I, d- I definitely had a dream. I just didn't realize that dream would be filled with so much failure. Um, but it's always the failure that motivates us and encourages us to keep on keeping on and keep on moving forward. But yeah, I grew up in New York, as you may be able to tell at times by the accent. I loved baseball. I loved the Yankees. I loved going to the stadium, and I was always um, dreaming of playing at that stadium someday. And ultimately, I found an alternative way to get there. But I went to college at the University of South Florida. I studied sports medicine, and I always had a passion for development. I always had a passion for training, both physical and mental training, because I was what you would call an underperforming player myself, in that I didn't have the talent set to get to the big leagues. I had the talent set to play in college, but I couldn't go the rest of the way just because I didn't have the talent set to get there. But I maximized every bit of the talent that I had, um, really just through hard work, discipline to that process, and great coaching. So the great coaches that I had in my life really helped me get to my next place and really helped me wring out every drop of talent that I could out of the sponge. But I also had coaches that were bad and really made me feel down, made me feel bad about myself, made me feel like a terrible performer. And at times I believed some of those lies until I met my next best coach. And that's really where I fell in love with coaching. I realized the possibilities that become possible when you have somebody encouraging you, motivating you, and aligning to your own spirit and desires and your own goals. So that's really what happened to me. And when I went to the University of South Florida, I knew that the Yankees had spring training and a bunch of professional sports teams were in the area. And I said, this is where I want to go because it's the land of opportunity for what it is that I wanted to do, which was go into professional sports and to become a coach in professional sports. So here I am, 19 years old. I'm interning with the football team at the University of South Florida. I really didn't have an interest in football. It wasn't my sport. Baseball was, but I knew that it was where I had to get started. And I heard the Yankees were coming to town in February for spring training. So on one February day, I had an off day from my internship. I had an off day from school. I decided to take a drive over to the stadium, and I parked my old beat up car about a mile and a half away from the stadium. And I walked up to the stadium, and I'm watching all of the players I grew up, idolizing in a way. Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, all these amazing players on the other side of the fence. They were stretching, they were playing catch, and it was me and all these other fans on the fence line watching the players do what they do. And it was amazing. I was taking pictures with my flip phone, sending it back to New York. And that day I went back to my internship. Um, and the coach that I worked under, Ron McKeefery was his name. He said, "Hey Dana, can I talk to you?" And he calls me into his office. And usually, when you get called into the office by a superior in a tone that he gave me, I was a little bit worried. But he said, "I just got a call from the head strength coach with the Yankees, and he's looking for somebody to hand out towels, hand out waters, and keep the place clean. Would you have any interest in that?" And I said, as a matter of fact, I just got back from there. I would have tremendous interest in that. When do I start? And he says, "Well, you start tomorrow." So the next day, I had school, but I blew it off. And I drove up to the stadium. This time I had a spot right up front. I walk in the main office, and this lady, Linda, at the desk says, "Are you Dana Cavalier?" I said, "Yeah, that's me." And she threw a credential around my neck that gave me field access. There was a F for field access and a C for clubhouse access. And for a kid from New York, this was like a dream come true. So I'm escorted into the Yankee clubhouse. They throw me in Yankee gear, and the next thing you know, I'm in the middle of the field, and I'm on the other side of the fence. So in 24 hours, I went from one side of the fence to the other side of the fence. So now I was with those players, looking at all of those fans that were taking pictures, and it was an amazing moment. And I always say that that's the way life works. You can literally go from one side of the fence to the other, no matter what it is that you do in a very short period of time. But you have to have vision, you have to have goals, and it may sound like that just happened in 24 hours, but that took quite a few years of visualizing to make it happen. And when I was in 8th grade, I went to a Yankees game, and I saw this coach on the right field line with all the players, stretching the players. The players were joking around with them, interacting with them. And that ended up being the guy that I ended up working under. His name was Jeff Mangold. And years later, that ended up being me.
What an unbelievable story. I actually have goosebumps. Just there's so many emotions there, so much, visualization, passion, belief. Maybe a bit of luck and a bit of timing at the same point. You were 19, and even humility. I obviously you had a dream and you were willing to do whatever it took, but maybe somebody wouldn't have been that open or want it that bad to do what you did.
I I wanted it bad because I had, number one, I had nothing to lose, and I had everything to gain. And I still look at life like that. I'm not intimidated by anybody. I don't have any fear. I really don't. Um, and I just go for what it is that I want. And and it's an amazing feeling when you could approach life like that. And if I don't know how to do something, I figure it out, or I find somebody that does. So it's constantly looking for the next opportunity or the next resource, and knowing that success is at the cross section of those two, opportunity and resources, and really, action. So if you have, action and resources, and you find the right opportunity, you have a great chance of doing something great.
And I love that, that nothing to lose mentality, but only everything to gain. Because when you opened up, you mentioned about failures. And I think too many people, especially in sales, they're not willing to take these risks. They're not willing to fail. And I see failure. I don't like the word fail. I say it's feedback because it shows we've tried. And I think the opposite of not trying and then living a life with regrets. And I think a lot of times we don't try because we listen to the story we're telling ourselves in our head. But if you took the approach that you did, it like I have nothing to lose here. So, what would you say, coach, for those who continue to play it safe and just to kind of get out of their head and actually try, get some form of action out there?
Yeah, well, playing it safe is actually failing, right? It's actually not winning. It's setting up both regret in the current and regret in the future. So by you playing it safe and not taking a risk, you can't have success. You can't not take risk and be successful. So if you say to people, I want to be successful, and then you say you don't want to take risk, you can't achieve what it is that you say you want, because success and failure travel together. They travel together. That's how you learn. I was reading something the other day, and I really enjoyed it. And it said, the standard learning systems that we are, exposed to as young people in school, it's built on, you're graded, and it's based on how you do on an exam. But to be a great entrepreneur, or to be a renegade or an outlier in what it is that you do, it's not about passing the exam and trying not to fail. It's about learning through action and failing as a result of some of those actions. And if you get comfortable with that, you actually change your relationship with failure. So you can call it feedback or you can call it failure. But if you change your relationship to the word, it doesn't have a negative connotation to it. It's sort of like the unknown. When you talk to people about the unknown and you were to interview 10 people and say, hey, tell me about the unknown, 9 out of 10 people, probably 10 out of 10, would often tell you it's a negative place. But the unknown is where all your dreams are, all your accomplishments are in the unknown. So you have to always think of these words and the language that you use and how that language sculpts your action and influences your results. So I'm very, very big on language, because how we communicate with ourselves is essential in determining what it is that we get as a result. And many people don't think about what it is that they're actually saying. I was talking to somebody earlier, who's on a sales team, and I said, "How many times do we say I have to do this? I need to do this?"
Mhm.
Or, "Yeah, when this happens, then I'll do that." Or, "If this happens, then." That's all negative language. You cannot succeed speaking like that. It's not, blatantly negative, but that language is a catalyst for overthinking. And overthinking is a negative thing.
I think language plays a huge role, and I know I hear people saying that too. I have to do this. I have to, and I say I get to. I get to go for a 10K run. I'm not. I have to. I choose to. And my gosh, what benefits I'm going to see out of it. So I do agree with language plays a huge role in what we, subconsciously. And I think if you don't pay attention to it over time, it definitely can influence your behaviors and your action.
Yeah, and most people don't realize what it is that they're actually saying. Like,
Hmm.
just saying something like "I hope" or "I wish." I call all of that language that I just spoke of. I mean, I come from sports, so it's a little more edgy, but it's loser talk. It's not aligned with winning outcomes. It's not. I'm fortunate enough to coach some amazing people in many different disciplines. Many have just knocked it out of the park, and they are the most optimistic people. But it's not false optimism where it's like, "Hey, today is going to be a great day." They have a conviction within them where they determine the outcomes that they get. And that's their true belief. They believe that they are outcome influencers. They influence outcome as a result of action and as a result of thought.
And coach, do you think that has something to do with really understanding and knowing their why, their true purpose?
So we talked about this before the show in terms of why. And this is what I'm going to kind of throw upside down a little bit. I don't believe in why, because I believe in who. Before you can have a why, you have to know who. You have to know who you are. And I find that that is the prerequisite to a why. So you can have your why, but if you don't know who you are and you don't know your who, your why erases itself. So I'm a big, big believer in who, because it's oftentimes the who that can sabotage everything going forward. There's a lot of mental ping pong that takes place amongst a lot of people because they just don't know who they are, and what they stand for. So that's another thing that I say. You got to have your who down and your what before your why. There's two steps before the why, and that's the who and the what. Who am I and what do I stand for?
And do you think that what do I stand for makes you grounded? Just giving you that sense that I'm not going to conform. Like I have such, just like you were saying, that sense of conviction that they have an optimism. And if they know what they, what they stand for, it kind of gives them that, they're anchored. They're not going to waver. And that could be, in emotional setting when times are tough. You know, do they, um, do they take an even keel approach, or are they anchored? If someone's questioning them, do they really know themselves and kind of like not deviate from the behaviors? Do you think that contributes to it?
100%. It's like that old saying that says tough times don't last, but tough people do. And if you were to say, well, what is tough? Tough is somebody that knows who they are and what they stand for, what their character is, what they believe. They're people that are oftentimes uninfluenced by public opinion. They're uninfluenced by culture. They're influenced by what it is that they believe. And there are arguments that can be had where say, "Hey, coach, that's limiting. That could be limiting because if everyone's doing this and you're not, uh, you may not be a part of the, just a part of what everybody else is doing." And that's exactly it. If you sell just like everybody else, you're just like everybody else. If you do anything just like everybody else, you're just like everybody else. But if you look at the percentages as it relates to success in anything, it's the outliers, the people that do something different, have a different way about them, a different energy about them, a different talent set, that are the winners in life because they honor their gifts, they honor their talents. And by doing so, they can go to a place that somebody else can't. And again, I'm fortunate to work with some really high performers. They think differently, they act differently, and they're oftentimes misunderstood by many because they don't do things the same way as everybody else. And that's a gift. And to honor that gift, that takes courage, that takes guts. And to go against the grain in anything that you do, not in a way because where you're arrogant or you're just somebody that says, "Oh, if everyone's going that way, I'm going this way." It's because you feel called to go that other way. That's power. And when you can unleash that level of personal power and conviction, the future is very bright for you.
I love that, and the outlier, and I think a lot of times people, you're taught to kind of play within the boundaries. When I grew up, anyways, and I think now it's different. Like the education system is more out of box thinking, and they reward that kind of behaviors. And I think that's even when you look at sales now, and it's so hard to break through the noise. And I think it's the outliers and those who can interrupt the pattern and see things different and beat to their own drum and blaze their own trail. Those are the ones that are standing out because people crave that now more than ever before.
Yeah, and Karen, you say that, and when you say that, the one thing I never want anybody to take away from that statement is that they have to peacock themselves and become somebody different, right? I want people to look at themselves, every characteristic and trait that makes them up, and say, "Hey, what's my best? Like, what can I lead with here?" There's some people that are just naturally very social. There's some people that are naturally very analytical. There's people that are naturally artistic and free flowing. And there's people that are very detailed and organized. Lead with your best and lead with who you are. But don't become something else or somebody else because you feel that that's the best person to get something done. And all of a sudden now you have many different masks that you wear to please many different consumers. That is a fatal error. You just got to know who you are. And like in baseball, a leadoff hitter is typically a guy. He'll get a base hit. He'll drop a bunt. He'll steal a bag. He's fast. But a number four hitter is a guy that gets paid to hit home runs. If the leadoff hitter tries to hit home runs and the four hitter tries to steal bases and drop bunts and hit singles, they're out of position. And that is a tremendous, tremendous problem. Both of those individuals can do very well. Both of those individuals can get paid a premium, but they can't if they're not honoring their best traits and doing what they do best.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And I think, in real life, it would also become very exhausting because you're just, you're not being authentic and true to yourself. And that's just kind of a sad way to live as well.
Well, think about one of the big things that always seems to be trending over like the past 5 or 10 years, or maybe even past that. But it's the word burnout. Why are people burnt out? People are burnt out because they're constantly adapting. And that's, for me, it goes right back to most of them don't know who they're who and they don't know their what. So they're seeking and they're trying to find and they're burying themselves because they're always overthinking, overcomplicating, and oftentimes doing way too much. So when I work with people, I have them put
Hmm.
together a bullseye and say, hey, what are your most essential activities that you need to be doing? There's typically 3 to 5 things that you need to do every single day. And when you do those things with frequency and with consistency, the outcomes will produce themselves because those 3 to 5 things, that big 3 to big 5 that sit in the center of your bullseye, that is your process. And a good process gets good results. A great process gets great results. And a bad process gets you bad results. So it's very, very important that you adhere to a process. And if you don't have one, you need to find one. You need to develop one. And how do you develop one, coach? What's the tactical part of this? You have to test. Let's use an example as it relates to your mental well being. Uh, Today, everybody says you should meditate. And I'll tell you firsthand, meditation in the sense and the way in which we know it is not for everybody. If you have a type A high horsepower athlete and you think you're going to take that person from who they are to just immediate silence is very, very difficult. There's a lot of transition steps in between that. Same thing with a high performing CEO or really a high performer in any sense of the word that's a go go go, a fast mover, a type A. It's very difficult for them to go to one side of the spectrum and then to the other. So we have to always be thinking about how to get people from here to there. But in terms of the tactical, in regards to developing a personally curated and personalized routine, you have to test things. If meditation is not for you, it should not be on your routine. If weight training is not for you, it shouldn't be on your routine. You may be more of an endurance type of person. So when I coach people, it's always about developing this center of 10x activities. When I do these 3 to 5 things that work specifically to me and for me, and I execute on them, I will get the desired result. And the way in which I get that result will be very different than Karen. It'll be very different than Coach Dana. It'll be very different than 99.9% of my team, but it works for me. And that is what we have to get back to. Individuals make up teams. We can't approach a team the same way. We can't approach everybody on the team the same way. Individuals make up teams. I've said this for years, and it doesn't always get received. But every person is different. Our genetic makeup's different. Our makeup in general is different. Our learning style is different. If we don't honor that, we're dishonoring people.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And coach, what I take from that is when you think about, sales leaders, I'm taking it away from the sports analogy for a moment, but if they're not just as you mentioned, if you're trying to get a type A athlete to meditate, it might not work for that person. But there's still another thing you can do to quiet the mind, to slow it down, right? But I think sales leaders, they're not coaching to the individual, they're coaching to the team, and they're kind of painting, using the same brush to for everybody. And you just think, people are looking to be developed, they want to win, but the leadership unfortunately is not using a formula, a winning champion formula, to do that, because everyone's, as you said, we're all unique, we're all individual, and what motivates you may not motivate me. So, what message would you have for the leaders who are kind of taking that old school mentality of, well, let's just, get everybody, from we're all at A and let's all move to Z. And it's like, well, we don't all move at the same pace. I'm going to move differently. I'm going to be, I'm going to think about things differently. So, what would you say to kind of get them onto that more individualized coaching platform?
This is actually one of my biggest issues with, like, let's say, public speaking, right? Where you send out this generalized message and you expect everybody to adapt to it, right? This is why I love coaching, because coaching, the true essence of coaching, and I feel like it's in some instances it's lost as it relates to corporate coaching. Like, coaching in the sports world and coaching in the business world are two different things. That's why I've loved the transition, because in sports, there's no other way but to address the individual. I mean, we have scouting reports on every player. We know their strengths, we know their weaknesses, we know how to approach them, we know what kind of learner they are. We understand them from many different angles and dimensions. So the first thing I would say to a leader uh, is, hey, get to know your people on an individualized basis, but you also need to have some sort of a scouting report and on each of these people. How do they learn? What do they respond to? Some people respond to negativity, believe it or not. We're in an era of just positivity all the time, but I've seen people work really well when there's a little bit of negativity and a little bit of a zing to them strategically. If you use that on everybody, you're going to lose your whole team. So you have to know what motivates each individual person on your team. And it's a shame in sales that more organizations don't approach their sales teams this way, because I've always felt this. Sales teams drive oftentimes the success of an organization. These are the people on the front line presenting your product. Very often, I get solicited by salespeople, and I know the good ones and I know the bad ones. The good ones are all about relational selling. They get to know you, they get to know who you are. The bad ones are just constantly throwing lines in the water, checking on. They have a different essence about them. And I always said that if the right leader wrapped their arms around these people and understood why the greats are great and the not so greats are not so great, and they were able to have a report, like a scouting report on each one of these people that make up their teams and organizations, you could help each one excel. And that's another thing as it relates to sales and team and personal development. Um, Oftentimes, leaders, they don't spend enough time with the high performers, and they spend all their time trying to catch up the low performers to the high performers. Big mistake, because if you could inspire, motivate, engage, educate further your top performers, they're going to make you a fortune. But if you're spending all your time saying, we got to catch up so and so, and we got to get so and so better, and they're your lowest performers, and you're not focusing on your high performers, you get in big trouble. And we've seen the same thing in sports. If you just focus on Derek Jeter, um, you're going to get much, much more output out of what is already a high performer. Where there's some low performers, they're just low performers. You can give them more resources, more money, more anything, and they're still going to be lower performers. But oftentimes, leaders tend to spend more time on low performers than high performers. And then they wonder why the high performer leaves.
That's exactly what happens, and unfortunately, that's what happened to me as well. But the high performers still need, and at that point, it's a tweak. Sometimes it's a sounding board. It's just it's not starting from scratch. They're a high performer for a reason. I also think culturally, when you're not investing in them and you're investing in the Bs or the middle players, it's telling them or making them feel that they're not valued. And I think, like you said, like if you're focusing on the Jeters of the world, it's just a little shift to the right and then it's whoa, and otherwise it's a big effort. It's going to take longer time, but it's like that's low hanging fruit right there. Why don't you go for that?
Yeah. And Karen, I'll tell you this, those high performers, man, you got to show them the love. They love when you show them the love. They want to be recognized,
Hmm.
they want to be seen within the organization as high performers. And when you do that, most leaders worry about, well, we don't want them to be treated different than everybody else. And that brings me to a point. Derek Jeter said this years ago, I never forgot it. He said, respect everybody, but don't treat everybody the same. It's a very, very big mistake. Because if you treat everyone the same, your lowest performer and your highest performer, there's going to be tension within your organization. Treat your high performers like gold, and then your younger performers or your underperformers will aspire for that. They'll have something to aspire to. And those that don't, by the way, you have to get out of your organization.
Yeah.
I've worked with a couple great companies, and one of the companies that I've worked with, they have a special title and group and class for their highest performers. They call them the Eagles because the Eagles soar above everybody else. They get special perks, they get special, dinners, they get all sorts of things. But people get very hungry to become an eagle. It's exciting when you become an eagle. There's a ceremony. It's a big deal when somebody joins that group, and it's very, very cool. And those eagles have a lot of pride in being eagles, and they also love the fact that they are recognized. Very, very important.
When you put in that work, that dedication, that vision, and you become an eagle, that shows other people the path that's required. And also, I think just from our opening conversation, like that's going to invite people to fail, to take risks, to say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get my wings because I want to be there. And so I think it's good to highlight that in it. I feel that it's going to be motivating more than discouraging.
Absolutely. And the one thing I'll say about leaders today, and I get it to some degree because there's a lot of pressure on leaders. They want to do the right thing. They want to make the right choice. The truth is they don't want to be called out by HR. They don't. So it creates a lot of corporate structures. They create a defensive culture rather than an offensive culture. And if you're going to create a defensive environment for people, they're going to give you just enough. They're going to play it safe. They're going to try not to fail. They're not going to take the risk. And there's a lot of hypocrisy that exists in organizations. You tell people, hey, go for it. We're a family here. We believe in you. But as soon as something goes wrong, all of that gets turned upside down. So you have to be very, again, careful
Mhm.
of what you tell people because people believe it. If you tell people we're a family here, they feel like they can say what they want to say and do what they want to do, how they want to do it, because they'll be embraced much like they would in their family. So companies today, I find, have to be very careful with the wording, and the sayings and what they adopt, um, in terms of what they're aspiring for, even in their culture, because you can't say it and then you know not hold up your end of the bargain because you'll create a very
Yeah.
defensive culture, and over time that wears people down. It upsets them, and they feel betrayed, and then they leave. And then the leadership says, well,
Mhm.
look at how much time we invested into this person. Look at the resources we invested into them, and they left. Let's not maybe do that as much going forward, or let's find let's take a shortcut in some way, and that leads to what I find bad, what I call bad culture.
And I think, that defensive culture or just giving enough or bare minimum. It also, the tenure of a sales leader is 18 to 19 months. So they're kind of going in with their head on the chopping block. So it's not really inviting to say, let's really take a step back and get to know our team and, try to build this culture. They're just almost reactive, just saying, like, I'm going to define myself by my title because I'm not going to have enough time. So they're almost set up for failure, in a little bit. And for, the sad thing is for the good ones who actually want to learn, their how and their why, and really understand what makes their team tick in order to develop them and improve their performance. Again, that tenure is so short that they may not make it there.
But you know what? I think that's a great segue and a parallel to sports. The day you sign a professional contract as a player or a coach, I always said this, it's like flipping an hourglass upside down. But you have two choices. That hourglass flips upside down and your clock is ticking. Um, but you have a choice. Do you show up and give it everything you got, knowing what the outcome's going to be? At some point, you're going to be done. Whether it's 18 months, 19 months, or 8 months, you, by signing that contract and by signing that agreement, have an obligation to yourself and to your team. And the obligation is this: I expect greatness from myself. So therefore, I'm going to show up and I'm going to bring everything I have, knowing wholeheartedly that there's a chance I could get in trouble here, you know? So that's important to recognize.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a champion mindset here, knowing that, the odds are against me, but I'm going to give it my all and I'm going to play the long game and I may defy the odds in this instance, but and again, it's not everyone's chopped at 19 months, but that's kind of what it's showing these days.
And I think part of it is, I always say, you have to know the rules of the game in which you play. So the rules of the game in which we play, if that's the truth, right? The truth is that the life cycle of a typical person in sales, let's say it's 24 months, whatever. We have to embrace that. But that should not determine how we show up every day, because we have an obligation to even ourselves, right? We never want to look back at something and say, well, maybe I could have stayed there longer if I did more, or if I worked harder, or if I did my best. It's just you have to know the rules of the game in which you play. And being in that position may not be a long tenured position. That's okay. Be the best short tenured person they've ever had. Make it difficult for them to get rid of you. Make it a difficult choice. And if you do that, you will leave feeling very good about yourself.
And I think, coach, that obligation, that sense of I'm not going anywhere can also apply. Think about, in sales. And maybe there's an opportunity that's just almost impossible to win, or there's an incumbent and you're trying to penetrate the business. And if you adopted that same mindset, like, I'm going to give it my all, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to leave here with no regrets. Like, you're pulling from that same deep level of strength and belief that it might not happen, but what if it does?
Yeah, and that's the best. I don't know. I've always approached everything like that. Like in Yankee Stadium, I have a sign that um that I put up years ago, and it still stands today. And it just says simply, "Get comfortable with the uncomfortable."
Yeah.
There was not one day I drove to that stadium and felt comfortable, but there was not one day I went to that stadium and didn't honor that and say, "Hey, I'm not comfortable. I better work my butt off." And I believe that allows you to stay longer. And it's whole. I just finished up this book that I have being edited now. It's called Habits of a Champion Team. It'll be out in a few months. And I said, we have standards that we have to hold ourselves to. So many of us, we get so caught up in holding other people to standards, but we have to hold ourselves to a certain standard. And that standard is just, again, this is how I do things. This is who I am. When you hire me, this is what you're going to get. This is the product that you're going to get. And that's what I hold myself to. And whether it's working with a professional team, whether it's working with a company, whether it's working with a CEO, whether it's working with a leader, or whether it's coming on a podcast, there is a standard. You have to show up. Don't mail it in. And I see that. Some people, if they're talking to Nike, they're a certain way. If they're talking to somebody smaller, they're different. It's like they're more confident with the small organization or group than they are with the big one. But it's like, no, that shouldn't influence anything. Hold yourself to a
Mhm.
standard and attack appropriately. That's what it's all about.
I love that, and I think too many people do that. I know when I'm in a meeting, I don't even want to know titles because I don't care. I'm going to treat them all the same. They're all going to get the same, amount of respect, regardless if there's CEO or the guy who, or the girl who cleans the cafeteria. So it's all the same to me. But what you said there, get comfortable with uncomfortable. Like, think about, where we're in right now. I mean, everyone was forced to work remotely, whether you're an individual contributor, where you're managing a team. The technology adds a different layer. But I think now that we're a year and a bit into this, like, we're leaning into that discomfort. And for those who embraced it and leaned into it, they are seeing, enormous change for the good on the other side. And the irony is, probably we wouldn't have leaned into that. It was kind of thrust upon us. It was situational. We didn't make the choice to do it. But I think our eyes have been open now to almost like, look what we can do. Look how resilient we are as humans. look what's possible when I actually focus, when I try something new. And I just think that translates to so many other parts of our lives. Like the pandemic has shown us things that it's like, hey, I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know that I could do that. And now, my confidence, my willingness to try new things is off the charts.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. The past year plus, you either adapted or you or you were out. You didn't have a choice, and it's amazing, right? What if more times we don't give ourselves a choice, and we say it's either adapt or I'm out, and that I found to be very important. And I have clients that have done acquisitions through Zoom. I have clients that have sold companies for hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars through Zoom.
Hmm.
And it's real. This is the environment that we're in. And I always say you have to separate from your emotions. You have to separate from your feelings. And too many times we get caught up in how we feel about things and then we start saying, "Well, this is how I feel about it," for emotional reasons, and it inhibits our ability to work. For me, I've always been big on like, what am I trying to do here? What are we trying to do here? And whatever comes our way, we're going to adapt and we're going to move around that wall, over it, under it, around it, through it. One way or another, we're going to get what we want here. And that's an attitude. And right when this pandemic happened, I had a lot of companies call me and teams and say, "Hey, coach, can you talk to my group? Can you talk to my group?" I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And I had one message for them. The message was this: play offense. Because when you play offense, right away, your mindset goes from being on your heels and just taking the hits to applying the hits, to applying the pressure. So you could either let COVID and a pandemic and everything put pressure on you, or you could turn it around and say, I'm going to put pressure on the situation by making things happen. And that's really what I did. That was the message that I promoted. And it worked because you weren't pushed around by constant changes as it results to policy, as it results to really everything. When is this open? Oh, now it's closed. It's open again. Now it's closed. It's still closed. It's still closed. Oh, it's open. That if you're gonna play that game mentally, you're gonna be in a spiral because it's constantly dictating to you your response. Just decide what your response is going to be and stick with it. Like my response when I got the news, I was actually at a baseball game with the GM that hired me, and he's like, "The season's going to be done." It was spring training. He's like, "We're going to be done for the season." I said, "Okay, got it." And then, it's like I had a bunch of speaking gigs canceled. Got it, no problem. I could have said, "Oh man, look at how much money I'm going to lose. Look at all these, this travel plans I have to re." No. What are we going to do now? That was it. What are we going to do now? And what we've learned is that there's a new way of doing things.
Hmm.
Is it going to be the exclusive way that we do things? Probably not. But what this time period has taught us is that we have more bullets in our gun than we thought, right? We have multiple ways to do things. There's going to be people that prefer this mode of exchange. And you know what that's going to do? That's going to keep people maybe home a bit more, right? So they can invest in their family, they can invest in other things. They don't have to be on the road all the time. There's other ways to do things. So there's benefits if you choose to see them. There's new ways to do things if you choose to honor them. There's another way to get a result than the way that you've always done it. Embrace that. And that's what I call playing offense. That is the champion's mindset. Champions say, whatever it takes to win, I'm going to figure out a way to win. That's it.
I love that. I love that. And I think just even saying that word play offense, like your physical stance changes and you're moving from victim to victor. And you're like, you're not taking the control. I think also, detaching from the outcome because I can't control it. There's so many things going on that it's like I gotta hold my, hold firm, plant my feet and just go for it. Play offensively.
Yeah. And yeah, and think about this. Think about this standpoint. if you are that person, and this is what I told people, and I still tell them, there's a lot of people that you're talking to on the other end or selling to on the other end. They may be totally frightened. They may be totally scared for whatever reasons, whether it's their health, whether it's their financial future, whatever it may be, their company's future. It is your job to always dictate the energy in the room. The, it's your job to dictate the energy that you bring to a conversation. Like I go into every conversation saying, this person's going to leave the other end of the line fired up. Like I'm going to leave them feeling excited and ready to move and ready to take action and ready to attack. Well, in sales, if you have that same approach, hey, I bring the energy to the room as opposed to, well, I hope they say what I want them to say. I hope they buy. Sometimes if you can release yourself of your desired outcomes and you just commit to who it is that you are, what it is that you believe in, what it is that you're selling, and you show up with passion and fire and excitement for the problem that you get to solve for people, that's the best sales job there is.
And they feel that. I mean, I think sales is it's a transfer of energy, right? And I think also just what you shared, it shows your others focused. If I'm going in there and I'm thinking about everything that I want to get out of the call and my energy, I'm thinking about them. What energy do I need to do to persuade them, to influence them, to pick them up, to see the way, the better way, the future way? That's our job as salespeople.
Yeah, it is. It is. I always say that the job you're when you're in sales, what a gift. You get to solve people's problems for a living if you see it that way. Some
Mhm.
people see it as they're in the business of selling. You're actually in the business of solving somebody's problem. Like when you find the right prospect and you show up with a solution to their problem, I mean, you're like Jesus coming in. You are a problem solver for these people. It's amazing. It's like you should have prospected so well that they're like, "Thank God you're here because I've been looking for something like this, and I'm glad that you are the messenger that brought it to me." That's a very different approach than most people take. Most people have their commissions figured out before they even make the call.
Yeah, and those are the sales reps that that you can just see a mile away. But I just think, yeah, you got to be others focused, and I think that's all golden because the ones that are just so commission focused, unfortunately, they're not gonna make it anymore because people just aren't gonna tolerate that. That's old news. That's gone.
Yeah, people are smart. People, they have intuition. They know when you have their best interest in mind or just yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, when you think about habits of a champion, and a lot of our discussion today have uncovered what those are, the importance of just knowing your how and your why, both from a leadership standpoint as well as a salesperson. Coach, if someone's like, I really want to hone in and improve my habits so that I can develop that champion mindset. Like, if you were to give them three things where they can just start today, what would those three things be?
Well, the first thing that I always lead with is your physicality, right? I believe that you need to activate your physical self every day. You need to get your heart rate up. You need to induce a sweat. And I say that because after you work out, no matter what shape you're in, how do you feel after you exercise? You always feel good about yourself, right? You feel good about yourself and you feel good about what you just did. That's number one. Because, like we said, sales, anything you do is a transfer of energy. You have to have the energy to transfer, and it better be positive and it better be good. And it becomes positive and it becomes good when you see yourself in that light. So that's one. Get yourself going physically every day. Activate your physicality. Number two is I like to put together what I call your hit list. And I have what I call power plays and I have assists for those of the hockey folks out there. Your power plays these are the one to three things that you are going to get done today. These are what I call MVAs, which are your most valuable activities, or IPAs, which are income producing activities. You have to have a hit list of those. The assists are everything else that you have to get done. The little bit, the little things that you have to get done. But you have to have those three power plays, which are your main objectives. And when you have, again, you've activated yourself physically, you have those power plays. The last thing is just execution. You have got to execute. And most people don't execute because of really an emotional block. They're so focused on what could go wrong that they're not focused on what can go right. So, in order to get over that, what I like to do is say, write out what you want your outcome to be. I have a client, he's a multi billionaire, he's a fantastic guy, he's built many businesses, he's a serial entrepreneur. And he says, don't ever go to a meeting, host a meeting, have a meeting, be a part of a meeting if you don't know what the objective is that you want to achieve from that meeting. So, write it out before that meeting, write it out. So you've activated yourself physically, right? You have your hit list, power plays, and assists. And lastly, you have very, very clear objectives that you've written out for yourself. No one else has to see them, where you know what you want out of this call, what you want out of this meeting, and what you want out of this exchange. It may not all happen at once, but you better get something out of that meeting that you intended to get out of it, or give something to that meeting that you intend on giving to that meeting.
I think those are three very clear, very tactical, and I could see how they're they're repeatable. You could do those daily, and I think when your power plays, if you're adding 1 to 3 things every day, and I think what happens is we spread ourselves too thin. But imagine at the end of the week, like you've moved the needle.
Yeah, and Karen, what I do, I have these, I keep these cards, right? I use an index card, and
Hmm.
what I do is I set up for the week before my week what my week is going to be, and I got a lot of highlighted stuff here that's already done. So as soon as I'm done with this card for the week, if I finish it by Wednesday, I'm done for the week. Not that I don't
Hmm.
work, but I hit every objective that I needed to hit. And the sooner I do it, the more
Hmm.
time I have to, or pressure free time I have to play and have fun with.
Hmm.
But every week
That's
I make sure that I have my objectives prioritized, and then I go after it.
yeah.
When you know what it is you're going after, think about the energy, think about the clarity, think about the offensive nature of that. Amazing.
I think that's the problem. People don't know what they're chasing. So they can't write it down and they're spinning their wheels. They're not either committing, they don't have the clarity, or they don't know what that 1 to 3 things are that are going to move the needle.
Yeah. And then they try to do everything, but then they do
Mhm.
nothing. And
Mhm.
and it starts by taking just one action. Even if your
Mhm.
index card or wherever you write it down what you want to do doesn't have all of this stuff, write one thing down and do it.
Mhm.
Then
Mhm.
write another thing down and do it. See, the key is do it and do it to completion. If you don't complete things, you're always going to be disheveled. You're never going to be a person of power and conviction because you have too many open books. You need to start closing books.
Mhm.
You get paid for what you close, not what you open.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, coach, thank you so much for sharing your journey of your hard work, your grit, your vision, your childhood dream coming to life, and then how you were able to use that and change other people's lives, both in the professional league, but also now in corporate, where you coach high performance individuals as well as CEOs. I think what you're doing is amazing. I love the structure, the consistency, the repeatability of it all, and I think, over time, the compound effect really does develop that champion mindset.
Absolutely. 100%.
Well, listen, coach, if people want to learn more about you, your programs, where's the best way for them to follow you or just learn a little bit more about you?
Yeah, so danacavalia.com is sort of the gateway. I write a daily blog Monday through Friday. It's a quick read, 60 to 90 seconds, just something to get you sparked. And then I'm also on LinkedIn for the professional audience. Dana Cavalia, that's where I am. So I'm very active on both my blog and website as well as that LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, those will all be included in the show notes. So, again, thank you very much for your time and sharing your insights and your wisdom with us today. I think it's going to make a difference for a lot of people.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. And for those, thanks again for tuning in to the K2 Sales Podcast. If you like the show, please subscribe and feel free to share to those who feel you could use the message today. Thanks again, and see you next time.